In this episode, we're going to talk about how to approach different types of questions because, surprise, surprise, different types of questions call for different approaches. We're going to talk about these three question types here: vocabulary and context, line reference, whole passages, and a pair of related question types called 1, 2, 3 questions and except, least, not questions. Let's check those out. The first question type is vocabulary and context. And FYI, all these questions are also available in your bonus materials if you want to check them out and even try answering them. So vocabulary and context is going to look like this, and it typically has the words most nearly means in it, so that's how you can immediately recognize what you're dealing with. Now when you have a vocabulary and context question, here's how you deal with it. You simply treat them like sentence completion questions. That means you're going to read 2 lines before and after the word in the passage, and if you need a little more, you can read maybe 3 lines above and 3 lines after, up to you. After you do that, you're going to try to capture the concept for what goes in the place of that mystery word with a prediction of your own. And then finally, try to find the answer choice that best aligns with your concept. And you want to always do these problems because they're pretty quick, and you're also more likely to get them right than other question types, so there's some easy points. Let me show you what I mean because they're a little tricky to understand the first time you see them. So we're back to the sample question, and in line 10 we have annals. There it is right there. We're going to want to read 2 lines above and below and treat it like sentence completions. So you should visualize it magically turning into a blank. And then what you're going to do is read 2 lines above and 2 lines below, a little more if you need, to get some context. So let's do that now. We no longer imagine that the history of our institutions has less interest than that of our wars, nor that the blank of the humbler classes are irrelevant to those of the privileged orders. We go further still. What is above all sought for in historical works, blah, blah, blah. Now this is actually a pretty tough question, but there's a common construction that you should recognize, which is repetition. So the author says, we no longer imagine that the history, that's the key word, the history of our institutions has less interest than that of our wars, nor that the history of the humbler classes are irrelevant to those of the privileged orders. So just like the author says the history isn't less interesting than the wars, the history of the humbler classes, or the lower class, isn't uninteresting relative to the history of the privileged orders. So our prediction is something like the word history, and lo and behold, it's actually a perfect match, but it doesn't need to be. All it needs to do is have a concept that's similar to what you see in the answer choices. And I want to point out that a lot of these other choices would actually kind of work in the sentence, but they're not the same as the concept you predicted, the concept you were expecting to see here, which is why it's important to treat them like sentence completions and have an idea what you're looking for first. Incidentally, these question types come in 2 flavors. You know, maybe half the time the word here is a word you know, but it has many different meanings. And other times it's a word you may not know, or at least you'll recognize as like a big word or an SAT word. And so what makes these difficult varies. Sometimes it's the fact that a word has many meanings, and other times it's the fact that a word is unfamiliar. There's obviously a case where the word's unfamiliar, but annals means written histories or historical records, and that's why it's A. Not that you couldn't also get the same answer by making a prediction for what concept goes in the blank. So that's vocabulary and context. Next up we have line reference questions.